Welcome to the next edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I'm your host, Jessica Vaugh, president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay. Today we have on our second city council candidate, Joe Citro, who is running in District 1, which is Citywide. Thank you for joining us today, Joe.
Good afternoon on this cold and blusterous day here in Tampa.
Again, thank you for coming on. I'm not sure if that many people are familiar, so what I generally like to do before we kind of launch into platforms and politics with our candidates is learn a little bit about candidates, their background, where they come from, so people get a feel for that. So tell me a little bit about Joe Citro, the person, and not so much the candidate.
I've been living in Tampa since 1974. I moved here from Chicago. I graduated Lato High School and have some really great memories of how Tampa has been. I started off my politics in 2003 when I went to then sitting councilwoman Mary Alvarez and said, I want to get involved in politics. So she said, the first thing, if you really want to get involved in politics in the city of Tampa, get on some boards and learn how the city runs. I was on the Civil Service Board, which I later chaired, and I liked that so much that at the same time I got on the Code Enforcement Board as a magistrate. Now, when I first ran, I could not be on two boards at once. There was a conflict of interest. So I let the Civil Service Board go. I regret that because it was an interesting board to be on. I saw the workings between the city of Tampa and its employees. And I found out one major thing, that the city of Tampa is not always right. I've learned my compassion for the people of the city of Tampa on that board. For instance, there was a man who had 28 years and was 6 months away from his retirement. The city wanted to fire him, which means he would have lost all his retirement.
Sure.
And I said, no way. We can't do that.
So you got involved with politics, but what about you? Did you graduate? You said you went to Lato. Did you graduate? Did you go to college?
No, ma'am, I didn't. I decided to take a different route and got into hairstyling. Been a hairstylist for 35 years.
Wow, that's an admirable.
Life changed for me when I was 37.
Yeah.
And I started becoming more of an adult, shall we say. I joined many groups. I joined the Rough Riders, joined the Rotarians.
So, do you own your own hairstylist? Do you work in Tampa?
Yes, no, I own. I live in Tampa.
You're currently a hairstylist. Okay, and then you felt that you wanted to connect with your community.
Correct.
So you started joining these organizations. Led you to politics. You realized that if you wanted to be involved, you were going to learn more about our city, join some boards, and that started to open your eyes to the fact that there were some changes that we could make in the city government.
This city is a wonderful city. It's working well. However, there are some things that really need to be done. I'm a realist, and there are things that need to be done for many people within the city.
So you started working within some organizations. You saw some things that needed to be changed. What about that made you decide to run for this seat right now?
After I had run before, I still saw that this city was on track. However, any major city's wealth can only be measured by its poorest neighborhoods. And although the work that I have done, in Ybor City with the YCDC, the Ybor City Development Corporation, with 2 CRAs there, we have brought Ybor back to, go ahead.
We just talked about CRAs, but not everybody's familiar with those. So when you say you've been working with CRAs, what exactly is a CRA and what does that mean for the community? The
2 CRAs that are down in Ybor City, and there's one in East Tampa, there's one in Riverside Heights, there's one in new one in West Tampa, which we'll discuss that later on, is Community Redevelopment Association.
Okay.
Part of the ad valorem tax that is taken from the businesses and the residents there, thank you. Some of those monies are redirected right back into the community for redevelopment.
Okay.
And that has brought some great businesses, some great residents, facade grants. that have helped Ybor City.
Which means money to fix up the front of the buildings
Correct.
and to revitalize the way that the community looks.
And to direct businesses to come in those areas.
So now you said you ran before. What did you run for? What race was that?
I ran in District 4, South Tampa, and then I ran in District 2.
So you're committed to getting on city council.
That is my dream, my goal, and my ambition. No, that's something I want to do. I'm not going to be a person who just wants to become a politician and will run for judge one time or run for school board one time.
Sure.
No, city council is my goal.
Now, what about it attracts you over running for other things? What about being on city council really motivates you to keep trying?
You're going to hear many politicians say the same thing. I love this city.
Right.
However, I do love this city. I just would like to put Tampa to work, not only for itself, but it's for its citizens, and start moving the city in an economic way where everybody can have a good job, a good career.
Right.
And right now we have the Port of Tampa that is just wide open for success, especially for the residents in East Tampa that are low-skilled and no-skilled laborers that could go to work for companies that manufacture, assemble, import, and export, union or otherwise jobs.
So that kind of tells me a little bit about your platform, but tell me a little bit more about it. What differentiates you from the other candidates in your race, would you say, when it comes to your vision for Tampa?
What differentiates my platform is the acronym CITY.
Okay.
Careers, infrastructure, transportation, and youth development. My platform separates me from other candidates in the city because most of the other candidates in my race have really no idea of what's going on and have no experience with the city. So any ideas they have might not come to fruition because they don't know how the city runs and operates and how to go around doing things. There are 4 very, very boring reads in the city of Tampa. The comprehensive plan, the charter, the budget, and the codes of ordinance. And unless a candidate reads those 4 boring reads, they'll never know how to get things accomplished.
So you feel like what sets you apart is your understanding of the city and the infrastructure.
My experience, yes, ma'am.
So when you say you have the acronym CITY at the forefront of your platform, let's talk about each one. You said C was, remind me again?
Careers.
Careers, okay. And what does that mean in terms of?
Again, there are a lot of people that are in this city that don't have a career. They have a job.
Right.
Anybody can work at Walmart, no offense to the Walmart Corporation. Anybody can work at McDonald's, no offense to the Casper Corporation. I would rather see people getting gainful employment, earning great wages with benefits that can enable them to buy a house, maybe send the first person in their family to college. That's a career.
Right.
I would rather see that than someone working at a job.
Now, how would you see that sitting on city council? How would you implement that? What different power would they give, or how would you advocate for that within what you know of our city structure to make sure that that's a priority?
Zoning is the number one. You bring in a corporation, have them open their doors, employ the people, and then give them incentives on the back end of that. Prove to us, the citizens of Tampa and the council, that you are going to open a business, stay there, and hire people with great wages and benefits. Then give the incentives. Also, within our port, we can open businesses, like I said, for importing, exporting, manufacturing, assembly, giving them certain incentives.
So what I'm curious about is when we're talking about attracting larger companies or opportunity to put people at work, that obviously requires development, right? I mean, if we're bringing new companies in, there has to be places for these people to live, and there has to be, as your next thing, infrastructure, the next part of your acronym. So that leads me to what's on the forefront of everybody's mind when we're talking about growth and development, managing that with like affordable housing and making sure that as we grow and we attract these companies and we gentrify areas, that we're making sure that the impact of that, especially on marginalized and low-income communities, isn't devastating. So how do you see your vision as city councilmen managing the growth when we're talking about attracting these corporations, or when we're doing development, to make sure that the impact on marginalized communities isn't our last priority?
Then let's take into consideration what we were talking about, East Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
East Tampa is one of the last industrial areas.
Mm-hmm.
It has a great CSX rail line. It's not far from the port. You have 40th Street that goes all the way from the port to USF. Mm-hmm. The opportunities of careers are there. One of the few areas left in Tampa for people to have careers is East Tampa. If we can get more development in that already industrial area and get people hired, again, decent wages and benefits, the neighborhood has nowhere to go but up. People get better wages. They can afford houses, and we have plenty of property. I'm thinking future tense.
You mean the city of Tampa, sure,
has plenty of property down there that can be then turned over to developers, female developers, African-American developers that can develop at a smaller footprint price-wise than anywhere else in Tampa. Neighborhoods should come first, not only with affordable housing, but with careers.
So you're talking about infrastructure is the next thing, and I heard you mention the CSX tracks. And we're talking about transportation, which everybody cares about who lives in Tampa. So are you a proponent of using those tracks when we're talking about making transportation decisions in Tampa?
I would like to see them, and if it came down, bottom line, yes, I would. Any great public mass transportation that uses any type of rail has two sets of tracks. It's going to be tough with the CSX that's running through downtown, running through South Tampa, and running up through USF to have two sets of tracks. I see it more as a glorified streetcar, which can work. But I would prefer two sets of tracks. We're also going to have a problem with what's known as up north kiss and ride stations, where one of the parents gets dropped off, goes off to work, and then the other person goes home with children or drops them off at school. I don't see the areas for those kiss and ride stations along the CSX track from Gandy all the way up to USF. That's going to be the hard one.
So what's your vision for transportation and infrastructure that's different than or online with other candidates that are proponents of these kind of things in Tampa?
Our transportation needs are multi-level. There is no silver bullet. There's no special sauce. There's nothing that's going to solve. We have the high-speed rail is going to be coming into town. We have bus lines that have been deteriorated so that you cannot use them properly without spending 2 or 3 hours on a bus and taking multi-transfers. We have a streetcar that, thank goodness, that they're going to extend it, although I would much rather see it cross the river and go into West Tampa to collect CRA monies for those. It's our transportation needs are going to be many. One of the biggest ones that I want to see worked on is each and every day we have 100,000 plus people coming into our urban core from Hillsborough, from East Hillsborough County, Pasco, Polk, Pinellas, Manatee. And we see it every day on 75, 275, I-4, Leroy Selwyn Veterans, and every doggone bridge that crosses the bay. If we can get a third of those drivers off of our roads and on some, whether you call it rubber wheel trolley, a rapid bus system or rail system, our transportation problems are going to go down significantly. It's those 100,000 plus people that I would like to see serviced first. But then we'll have the extension of the streetcar, and with hope, with this 1 cent sales tax, we're going to have a better acronym, HEART line, to move people around locally.
Now, were you a proponent of this tax before it was passed?
I've had discussions with this with a lot of people. Up to, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks before the vote, I was 51%, 49. I can't I couldn't see giving 45 cents of every dollar to a transportation system, HART, that really hasn't proven itself. And I wanted to see where it said other forms of transportation. I wanted to see what those other forms were. I wanted to see a line item of what they were going to do with the monies. That's where I was on the fence. Did I sign the petition? Yes. Before the vote, did I support it? Yes. But I was on the fence for the longest time.
So we covered CIT. Now, Y stands for youth. So
Youth development.
Youth development. Tell me what that includes.
The city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, state of Florida, needs to get children from high school to a good career. A child leaving high school just to go to work, again, no offense to Walmart, no offense to McDonald's, to a low-end minimum wage paying job we're doing disservice to those students. We need to get them into a position where they can earn a good wage in a career. You look at HCC, a child can go from high school to HCC on a program for welding and leave there in 6 to 8 months earning $60,000 a job, $60,000 a year, And if they feel like jumping in the water and learning underwater welding, they can start at $90,000 a year. There is so many wonderful career options at HCC, but it's getting them from high school to a profession or into an apprenticeship program with carpentry, with electricians, tin knockers, sheet metal workers. We need to get them from there. We need to have some sort of after-school program working with the schools, utilizing the schools during summers where we can put them into different programs. We need more staff power because our parks and recreations are declining and we cannot staff after-school programs.
Which leads me to, since I've had so many city council members on, sitting city council members right now, whether they're running for something else or re-election, it sounds like, especially this last year, that our budget is tight, that we don't have enough money really to fund some of these ideas. So what's the answer to that? I mean, it's easy when you're a candidate running to have a lot of different ideas, but how do we, with a budget that's already so tight, implement and focus on these things? And how do we expand our revenue for city council?
It's going to be tough. CIT tax is coming up in 2 years, which could possibly lead us to a $5 to $10 million deficit. Through attrition. There's going to be a lot of upper management and middle management that is going to be leaving the city of Tampa in the next 4 or 5 years. With those people leaving, it's going to open our budget a little bit where we can hire more staff to do the boots on the ground work. But I am not a proponent of raising the millage rate. We're going to have to crunch numbers and find out where we can move things around. We're going to have a new mayor coming in who's going to have their budget, and I want to see line items. The city council doesn't see line items. I want to see that. I want to have programs where during the course of the year, city council can look at the budget and maybe every 6 months go back to the mayor and say, hey, we've got somebody left over here. Can we move this around here? Can we do different things? City council doesn't do that.
So would you say one of the answers is prioritizing less of the higher paying jobs to more of the skilled jobs that maybe don't make as much when we're talking about our city employees?
Opening up the opportunity to hire more people. The upper management, I was talking to the ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union, and I said, there can be some positions opened up with some higher management that's retiring. We can probably hire 1 or 2. And no, you can hire 4 or 5. We just need to have more boots on the ground, more staff. Construction services. There's not enough people out to go inspect. A mutual friend of ours, I'm sure you know, Roberto Torres, who owns Blind Tiger, couldn't open up his South Tampa location for almost a year because inspections weren't done, and he couldn't get a CO, certificate of occupancy.
So you feel like some of the basic necessities of things that we need to function as a city, some of those jobs haven't been filled and that we're lagging behind as far as being able to accommodate the things that we need to focus on as far as our city is concerned. Is that right?
Every time, I'm glad you used that phrase, basic necessities. Every time I go knocking on doors, every time I go to political forums, every time I'm just talking with clients or people on the street,
right?
They just want the basic necessities. Give me good roads. Give me well-lit roads.
Right.
Give me sidewalks. Give me fresh, clean drinking water.
Right.
Take away my waste, both solid and liquid, and provide fire and police keep me safe. Those are the basic necessities that city council has to worry about. Everything else on top of that is icing on the cake. Whether you want better transportation or whether you want a baseball stadium, the basic necessities has to be covered first.
So when you first sat down, I heard that you were talking about prioritizing and making sure that's done equally throughout the city. So when we're talking about meeting those basic necessities, I mean, there's no question about it that certain parts of the city are prioritized over other parts, especially in city council. One of our guests said that a majority of the people who vote in the elections are South Tampa people. So there might be more of a priority to keep that part of town happy since they engage in the elections a little bit more. When you talk about having a vision for making sure that all of these basic necessities are distributed equally amongst all of the different neighborhoods, how, especially as someone who's going to be representing the entire city and not something just district specific, what kinds of changes or how do you think that you'd be able to advocate to make sure that East Tampa, which you've spoken a lot about, or West Tampa is as prioritized, supported, and making sure that those neighborhoods are taken into, consideration by city council as much as, let's say, South Tampa?
Everyone is equal in the city of Tampa, in my book. Everyone will be treated equally in my book. The priorities will be for the city of Tampa with me, making sure that all monies are spent equally. People in this neighborhood in North Tampa say, we're forgotten.
Sure.
With me, you're not going to be forgotten. East Tampa is not going to be forgotten. And there is one street in this city that shouldn't be forgotten. That's Nebraska Avenue. Nebraska Avenue, especially when you start getting into Sulphur Springs. That's another neighborhood that needs a lot of help. No, my focus is going to be on the city of Tampa as a whole.
So now we're going to kind of get to the part where I want to hear more about specific issues. And this is where I think it's going to be interesting because you are more of a conservative voter, and your political history was more conservative. And now it seems like, it might be switching a bit. So tell me about kind of if you feel like your viewpoint from politics has switched from being a little more conservative to a little more focus on everyone equally, and what might have motivated that.
Let's for your listening audience that may not know, I'm a convert. And to put it in more simple terms, I used to live in a red house. Now I live in a blue house. And I never really was conservative, and I never really was liberal. I'm a realist, and there are things that need to be done in this city. Back when I lived in the red house, I could walk into a room of Democrats and say, I'm fiscally conservative, and I'd get a...
Right.
I would walk into a room full of Republicans and say, I'm concerned about the social issues. And that wouldn't be very liked. My leanings went more toward the Democratic Party. And in the past, when I helped candidates that were in the Democratic Party and I took flack, I didn't care.
Sure.
I wanted to support the best person for the office. And I'm still that way. But my leanings have now become a little bit more liberal. And I want to see social equality. And I want to see help for everyone.
Would you still consider yourself more fiscally conservative?
Oh, for sure. I don't want to spend $1,000 on a $2 hammer. I don't want to have to see. There is a project that is run by a housing authority here in Tampa that was not done correctly the first time. It wasn't done to ADA. They used, shoddy workmanship and inferior product. And it's having to be done again. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there are some people that were qualified to move in there that couldn't.
Right.
I don't want to see that happen again. Mm-hmm. That's being fiscally conservative.
Mm. Do you think you're more fiscally conservative when it talks to like social programs that the city might offer?
I want to see social programs benefit. I don't want to see wasted money anywhere. First and foremost, the program comes first. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to see wasted money on the programs.
So let's talk a little bit about issues. What would you say for somebody who might have been a convert? Now that there's this kind of huge move to privatize education, especially when we're talking about charter schools. Even though Hillsborough County has a school board that oversees that, there might be land use that comes through the city, or things might change as far as how much control the city has when it comes to education. What would you say is your feelings or your priority when it comes to public education versus kind of the charter school movement and the move to privatize education and school choice in general?
Well, first of all, not all charter schools are evil. Mm-hmm. I just particularly don't like the way they're being run by out-of-state corporations that have no idea of what's going on in Hillsborough County. My main concern is especially in South Tampa, there has not been a school open since Chiramani, and that's an elementary school. And with 35,000 people coming into Tampa, where is there a school going to go in South Tampa? Where is there going to go a school going into West Tampa? There is very little land. And with more and more people moving into downtown Tampa, where are we going to put a school there? There are some charter schools that fill the void, but I would shy away from charter schools, especially if land and zoning comes up as an issue. I would want to find out actually who's running those schools and what the school board has to say about it, and ask a representative of the school board to come in and state what their concerns might be, and to see if the charter school is a good idea to put in the city. I don't like the charter school system.
All right. And as someone who might have changed houses, tell me a little bit about LGBTA rights and if that's something that you think are important.
And I'm looking at my cell phone here. He is
looking at his cell phone.
I was on the Charter Review Commission for the City of Tampa, and we reviewed the charter, which hasn't been looked at since 1975. Mm-hmm. And we have, and there are some revisions, some amendments going to be coming up on your ballot March 5th.
Some, aren't there 18?
Yes. Well, yes. Supervisor of Elections said that amendments had to be worded, I believe, 75 words or less.
Oh, okay.
So we had to break
them up.
And I for those of you who follow me on Facebook, I've got a lot of friends that were asking me questions about that. So please go down ballot and read the amendments. They are good. This is the one I am most proud of.
Okay.
And this is section 10-3, discrimination prohibited. And this is what we the commission came up. Neither the city nor any other officers or employees shall engage in any practice or enter into any contract by legislation that will result in discrimination against any person or group of person because of race, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, color, pregnancy, age, marital status, family status, disability, gender, identification, genetic information, ethnicity, and any other basis or prohibited by law or ordinances. I am very proud of the commission that we did that. Back to your question. Mm-hmm. Any type of discrimination, any type of hate against anybody else for any reason based on sex, sexual orientation, sexual preference,
gender identity
is unfathomable to me.
Good. Nice to hear.
No. Hate is not good.
Yes. Well, no. Thank you for clarifying. Hate is not good. That is true.
And when I become city council,
Mm-hmm.
It will not be tolerated by this city council person.
Thank you for making a clear statement on that. I appreciate it. Tell me a little bit, because I see Harry Cohn's come out in favor of it. I've seen that recently. They were talking about Tote for Morrison. Tell me about what you think about adult use marijuana becoming legal in the state of Florida.
I was talking to a person, a politician, at the Gasparilla Parade, and he and I are both friends of Bill W. Now, for people that don't understand that, there are organizations out there that help people that had, how can I put it, addictive tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of those people. Medical marijuana to help people that are going through chemo, or have medical issues where they need to eat, mm-hmm. are in pain. I am in full favor of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can be fully on board for recreational use, only because of my addictive personality.
Sure. Right.
And I hope people in your listening audience can understand that.
Sure.
It would take a long time, in-depth thinking on my part to get fully involved in that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate an honest answer on that.
Thank you.
Here's another thing that I want to ask about, because I've been surprised about kind of the answers I've gotten from city councilmen who are sitting. And I do understand it, but it is still something that I think we should be looking at, especially when we're talking about electing new council members. There's a huge push in the Democratic Party in general, to raise minimum wage. And the target goal is to raise it to $15 an hour. There's a whole movement called the Fight for 15. It's been embraced in different states, and it seems to be embraced at the national level. But what do you think about that as far as our city's concerned?
Going back to my platform,
mm-hmm.
I would rather, let me clarify this.
Sure.
Let's start out from the beginning. Thank
mm-hmm.
you very much, Jessica, for letting me start from the beginning.
Sure.
Yes, I'm in favor of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's going to have to be incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
More especially, do you realize that there are city employees, full-time city employees, who are only still making $8.25, $8.50 an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Those city employees, through attrition, I would like to see incremented up to $15 an hour within 3 years.
So attrition, because the pushback that we've gotten is that we can't afford to pay our city workers that much.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to my platform,
yeah,
a $15 an hour wage, is it really a livable wage?
Right.
Is it really?
No, it's not.
I
even
would
really,
much
honestly.
rather see the corporations come down here and use our port, use our industrial areas, bring in the Fortune 500 corporations that will pay somebody a great wage with benefits and a career where they can be assured for at least the next 10 years they are going to have a solid job, mm-hmm. where they can afford to buy a house, where they can afford to buy a car, where they can afford to send a kid to college.
Do you feel like, especially in the environment that we're at, where we're looking at possible financial crisis, the housing market we're talking about, with the stock market, if there's going to be another depression of some sorts, if we're talking about corporations being the backbone of kind of uplifting our city and being the financial revenue that we need, in those situations, those companies tend to do huge layoffs and actually, tend to pull out of cities that they've invested in. There are companies right now, when we talk about these big corporations, that the first thing that happens when they're not meeting their shareholders' needs, or when they're not, making as much money, is to lay people off. So do you think that's really the answer to necessarily building infrastructure in Tampa when we're talking about good jobs and making sure that people have access to, the money that they need to live?
80% of all businesses are small business.
Mm-hmm.
Small businesses can't afford to pay better wages and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
there has to be the happy median. And again, going into the industrial parts of East Tampa, Drew Park that's near the airport, East Tampa that's near the port, I think there can be a happy median of that. Some people look at me when I say things like that and say, corporate welfare. But again, if we can make sure that they open up business, build their building, hire their employees, and maybe you're running up and running for a year and then give the incentives, I think Tampa would be better off.
Well,
with those types of businesses.
I do like that you've committed that you would like to see $15 a minimum wage. I don't know if I necessarily agree on how we get there as far as who we want to court, but I see what you're saying. One of the things I also want to talk about is when we're talking about big corporations, even though they have the ability to pay larger wages, they don't always, right? We look at, well, like we've talked about Walmart and how, a lot of times when they open up in areas, the people who work for them have to get food stamps or whatnot because they haven't paid minimum wage or living wages. Or Amazon was just now one of the biggest companies that, has one of the highest stocks and the biggest revenue right now, was just now pushed to paying $15 an hour, per Bernie Sanders and more of the progressive movement. So I worry that just because they can afford to, they don't always, pay, and a lot of times they don't pay their workers at least $15 an hour or livable wages. So is there something as a city councilman, when we're talking about bringing these companies here, that we can mandate when we approve their businesses or approve licenses to make sure that they are paying their workers a livable wage?
The two branches of government is the mayor is the executive power.
Mm-hmm.
The city council is the legislative power.
Mm-hmm.
The city council can grant zoning.
Mm-hmm.
I think with a strong mayor and with a mayoral election coming up, if a mayor will say something to the effect of, yes, I would like these companies coming down here, I would like to have them have a good starting wage.
Mm-hmm.
And then the city council can back it up.
Okay. What about workers' rights and unions? Because, when we're talking about larger companies, they've been kind of at the forefront of, unfortunately, union busting and making sure that workers' rights is demonized. And I know that, we even talk about here in Florida how, our state is so poor when it comes to union support. In our Constitution, the teachers don't even have the right to organize or strike. Would you say you're a proponent of workers' rights and unions?
I think anybody has the right to join a union.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Do you believe that their strength is what has provided fundamental infrastructure to the working class through so much of our history?
Yes. I'm going back to stuttering again. Yes, ma'am. And I have seen that the unions that work for the city employees, you don't always have to be a union member for the unions to work for you. I see the strength in numbers with union, and I see through the arbitration, the unions are working for the benefit of all employees. I feel that unionizing all employees that are going to be working here in Tampa should be open.
Oh, okay. So one of the things that I noticed, because you did apply for the Progressive Caucus endorsement, caught my eye is we ask a lot of questions on gun reform. And there were some things that you were strong on, some things that you didn't necessarily check off. So tell me a little bit about how you see gun reform, the issue, especially when it's so polarizing in America, kind of where you stand as far as gun reform is concerned.
Well, in my conversion from the red house to the blue house, that was one thing that I looked at.
Right.
And no offense to the NRA, but good Lord, the table is big enough. Just come and sit down. Let's talk. I'm not an advocate for assault style weapons. I'm not an advocate for bump stocks. I'm not an advocate for large magazines. I'm not an advocate for long rifles. But there is a symptom that a lot of people aren't looking at when it comes to weapons. And it also has to deal with opioid addiction It also has to deal with spousal abuse. It also has to deal with
toxic masculinity.
Well, maybe too much estrogen going on. Maybe too much testosterone going on.
No, in all seriousness,
No, okay.
it's mental health.
Oh,
Every person that has gone in and shoot, especially this last thing in Sebring, was it that
I think the last thing was in Louisiana.
Louisiana, yes. Of course, now they're saying mental illness. We as a society need to take a long, hard look at that. I'm glad that we have wonderful healthcare now. Excuse me. Let me back up. That we have the ACA. But physical health is one thing. Mental health is another thing. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. We need to sit down at the table with the NRA, with the gun manufacturers, and say, hey, look, why don't you guys put in some of your billions of dollars into this mental health issue? Let's all talk about this. And then here locally, the city council can't do much because we'll get sued by the state of Florida if we entered into that arena.
Right. It's true.
However, working with Janet Rifkin-Cruz, working with Susan Valdez, working with Kathy Castor, working with other politicians and say, there's the gun show loophole we have to clear up. I don't want to open the St. Pete Times, Tampa Bay Times, and see a weapon for sale and anybody can go buy that weapon.
Sure.
Why not get reputable gun dealers involved so that when you buy something at a gun show, it has to go to a reputable gun dealer, be held for 3 days, whether you have concealed weapons permit or not. That way the gun gets registered. The person buying it, we know who bought it. So in case something happens, we know where that weapon's been. The person can get a background check, see if there's any mental illness. And it's same with the newspaper. You buy a gun through, you got to go. That's where we really need to look at, in my opinion.
Gotcha. So when we're talking about healthcare, our last guest who just left, Luis Vieira, is a huge proponent of the ballot initiative where they're trying to expand Medicaid, that they're trying to get on the ballot. And that's one of the things that we ask, are you a proponent of Medicare for all? Do you think healthcare is a human right? From somebody who, might have lived in a red house before. Give me your ideas about, Medicare expansion, about Medicaid for all, about healthcare as a human right. How do you feel about that?
President Obama had the greatest idea, making healthcare affordable for all. However, it was placed on the back of the taxpayers. I'm willing to pay that extra so that people can get health care. I think that President Obama should have gone to the 5 major organizations and said, you need to clean this up. You need to take care of this. The attorneys, FDA, drug manufacturers, the doctors, and the insurance companies.
Right.
Especially the FDA. There's medication out there that could probably save hundreds of thousands of lives, but because you got to wait to 12 years before it can go through in the multi-billion-dollar studies.
Sure.
I went to Belize 2 years ago. You could walk into just about any pharmacy and get medication. In answer to your question, yes, I would support the expansion of Medicaid.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit now about the environment and protecting our natural resources, especially in Tampa. We're so susceptible, to climate change. Talk about sea level rise and our hospitals and major areas being underwater, and just protecting our natural resources. We've seen with red tide and what can happen when we don't manage development and corporate greed when it comes to our environment. How committed to our environment would you say you are, and how important is the environment in your platform as city councilman?
I say this in jest. I say we stop all permitting downtown and move our city hall to Temple Terrace. That's in jest. The 2 biggest polluters in Tampa Bay are Pinellas County and Hillsborough County. City of Tampa, with the $35 million that's coming from the 1 cent transportation fee needs to clean up its stormwater runoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
The city of Tampa needs to take a longer look at how development is affecting the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And making sure that the one lot that had one house
Mm-hmm.
that is now being changed to one lot, 16 condo unit
Mm-hmm.
is affecting our stormwater runoff, our sewage, our school system.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to your answer, we need to clean out our sewer system. We need to take care of our failing sewage system. Our infrastructure needs a kick in the pants right now.
That's for sure.
Especially everything that's running off directly into the bay. I'm a fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
I love our estuary. I love catching a snook and a red, releasing most of the time. I don't want to see that devastated.
So you think you'd be committed to the environment?
Without
as a
a
city
doubt.
councilman?
Without a doubt.
So let's talk a little bit about separation of church and state. Do you think that's important in leadership and in government?
Going back to that statement that was made that the United States will have no centralized church, i.e. the Church of England or the churches over in the Middle East that have their own law.
Mm-hmm.
I have my faith.
Mm-hmm.
My faith is different from my politics and will remain sacred. My faith, my politics.
Mm-hmm.
I will not let my faith contradict the oath of office that I will take for the citizens of Tampa. There's a time and a place for everything.
What about Bible study in school? Do you think that would be okay if they passed a law to mandate Bible study in school?
To mandate, no. If there is Bible study in school and it's a club, much like a chess club,
Sure.
much like any other type of clubs, glee club, with parental consent,
Sure.
surely. Why not? But it should mandatory? No, ma'am.
What I like to make sure I talk about, and it's definitely as a progressive caucus president, when we have candidates who fill out our form, especially candidates, Caucasian candidates, the issue we always get the weakest response to is racial justice, racial profiling, the issues we have with, some of our police force and, the abuse of African Americans. And so, especially in a city as diverse as Tampa, racial justice is something that we care a lot about. What are your thoughts on the issues that we have with racial divisions and racial justice in Tampa Bay? And as a councilman, how would you deal with racial injustice within our city?
Let me say that I have attended and graduated the Citizens Police Academy. That I have attended and graduated the Citizens Fire Academy. And if more people would see what our fire rescue and our police go through on a day, there would be an eye-opening experience. Answering your question, of course, we have a strong form of mayoral government. The mayor has charge of all department heads. City council can ask department heads to come down and keep questioning and questioning and questioning those department heads until our voices are heard. I will not tolerate any type of racial, sexual, or any other type of injustice by police or by fire rescue, whether it be with the citizens of Tampa or their own employees.
What do you think is societally an answer to some of the division we see within communities of color not feeling safe in situations where police officers are interacting with those communities?
People do not see what the police officers do within the communities. I rode along with a police officer in East Tampa the last time out. Brilliant man. He's a man of color. Each year, you can be assigned to a different district.
Right.
All you have to do is request it. This officer has been in the same district for 13 years. And I asked him, I said, don't you want to go somewhere? No, I know these people. I understand these people.
Right.
I know most of these people on a first name basis.
So community policing.
Yes. But people don't realize that's going on right now. There is so much going on with the police department and certain areas, all areas of the city of Tampa.
Sure.
And I've seen it firsthand, but I'd like to see more of that going out.
Community policing, where people are
sit down at the table. Let's
communities.
Discuss our issue. Let's not yell at one another. Let's not hate one another. Let's sit down at the table and discuss our issues.
Do you think we need to review our training policies?
There are their own training policies within the police department, if that's what you're asking. Sure, we can review them.
Yeah.
But they have first and foremost, they have their own policies above and beyond the City of Tampa policies.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that covers most of the issues that I wanted to ask you about. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like is important to your campaign, or that you want our listeners to know about you as a candidate that you'd like to cover right now?
My favorite color is blue. Sushi is my favorite food. No, again, visit my website.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
citroforcouncil.com.
Can you spell that for people?
citroforcouncile.com.
Okay.
Okay. Type Joseph Citro on
So
and
I've
Google
been
it.
saying Citro, and it's Citro.
Well, yes, don't worry about that. Call me anything you want, just don't call me an ambulance. And please go to our website, see who my endorsements are.
Who are some of your endorsements?
Would you really like to know? Let me tell you. Your public defender, Julie Holt.
Is it Juliana?
Juliana Holt, but
you call her by a short name.
Yeah, Julie Holt.
You're that close.
We are friends. Your property appraiser, Hillsborough County property appraiser, Bob Enriquez. Miss Susan Valdez, who is now a state representative. I just got the endorsement of Attorney Del Stewart, very big in East Tampa. Thank you, Del. Peggy Land, Richard Gonsmart. And by the way, Richard is throwing me an event this Wednesday, the 30th at Eulalie. Please, you and your listeners are more than welcome to come down and have a little manja, something to eat, and listen to my stump speech. Let's see who else. Carol Cordell, Mary Alvarez, E.J. Salcinas, who is one of the biggest historians in the city of Tampa. And believe me, I will not let the citizens of Tampa down, because I'm sure as heck not going to let those endorsement people down. I've been living here since 1974. Civil Service Board, Code Enforcement Board as a magistrate. I'm now chair for the Variance Review Board. Member of the YCDC, which is the Ybor City Development Corporation, which has 2 CRAs, vice president of the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce. I live in South Tampa. I work in West Tampa. My heart's in Ybor City, and I want to see North Tampa and East Tampa prosper and come to the forefront. This is my home. Tampa's my home.
Sure.
And I don't want to see anything go wrong with my home.
Sure.
I want to put Tampa to work, not only for itself, the city, but for its citizens too.
And so people can find you at your website. What about Facebook? Are you active on Facebook?
I'm always on Facebook. You can look at both. Is my name, Joseph Citro. And then as a candidate, Joseph Citro for City Council District 1. Yes, please follow me.
And are you hoping for people to help out with, are you canvassing? Are you phone banking? Are you looking for donations? How can people get involved?
Yes, any campaign can't survive without money. There's phone banking going on. I've been knocking on doors, going around, except for this cold, blustery day. I'm not going to go outside.
Yes, it's hindered a lot of canvases, unfortunately.
Yes, I got a pot of garbanzo soup at home waiting for me. Yes, anybody that would like to help this campaign is more than welcome. My cellular phone number, 813-505-9357. That's 813-505-9357. 9357. I'm looking at my phone waiting for it to ring.
Well, we're not live, so that's not going to happen.
Darn.
And so let's remind people of the election. So it's on March 5th.
March 5th.
Right. And you are running in District 1, Citywide. So
Citywide.
People need to be aware of what race you're in.
My name will be on each ballot in the city of Tampa.
Do you know when early voting starts?
Early voting starts. Oh, goodness. You're going to ask me that February 25th?
Okay. And when do early ballots drop? They're almost out, aren't they?
Early ballots are next week.
So people have to start making their decisions.
And you know as well as I do, not only you, Jessica, but the listening audience, that this last election, what was it, 45% voted by mail?
Yeah, it's a big percentage.
So when you, the listening audience, gets your vote by mail, you'll see my name at that top of the list. Just check it off there, and you don't need to go any further down, except for the other races.
And then they need to sign it.
Oh, yes.
And then make sure that they follow the directions and that their signature matches. And then they can follow it online at our supervisor of elections to make sure that it's been accepted.
You know, if we are getting to the end of this conversation, I really would like to thank you for inviting me into your home.
Oh, absolutely.
I would like to thank you for asking the important questions for the voters to know. And remember that by listening to your show, voters will become informed, and informed voters are necessary for every election.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming. I really appreciate every candidate that takes time to come out here in blind faith and make sure that they are transparent. They answer all questions. I never make any promises about where this interview is going to go, so they know they're literally in the hot seat when they get here. So I appreciate anybody who makes themselves accessible. And I wish you the best of luck in your race.
Thank you. You didn't beat me up too bad, and I hope I passed the audition.
And thank you again to our listeners. We appreciate everybody who takes the time to educate themselves on politics that are happening locally. As always, you can email us with any questions or comments at Vaughan, V as in Victor, AUGHN, the number 30 at gmail.com. This has been Reclaiming My Mind. I am your host, Jessica Vaughan, with Joe Citro, who is a candidate for City Council in District 1. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.